I've never done this before, so if it doesn't work, please help me. I don't know what to say. It's a great pleasure, definitely a great pleasure to be here. I remember when I received the invitation, I knew Leslie's hand was somewhere there because of the topic I was asked to speak on. But I said yes with a lot of bewilderment as to why I was saying yes to a seminar for 1.5 days in the other end of the world. And I was traveling from Chennai, and I did arrive yesterday, and I'm leaving tomorrow. I've never done that before, but I did it because it was in memory of Duncan Forrester. You have not spoken much of his time in India. You've mentioned it in passing, and you've only focused on the fact that the poverty in India affected him. But what you don't know is the great contribution he made to higher education in India, and particularly through the Madras Christian College. He literally built up that department on public administration. My husband, who passed away 4 years ago, was Duncan's student. And therefore, from the first day we were married till he died almost, he spoke so often about Duncan Forrester and the impact he had had on his life. So that's my connection and why I actually came. And of course, I was intrigued by the whole conference because I have been myself very interested in public theology and have contributed quite a bit in India to the discussions on public theology. And of course, the theme of embodying justice and peace. That is right in my heart. The title gives us a sense that it's enough of talking, enough of statements, enough of all that we have done, enough of theologizing, if I could dare to say it, and go out and embody justice and peace, live justice and peace, is what I felt I read into the topic that I was asked to speak on. We have a history of ecumenical engagement in justice work. And I did a lot of reading of how the World Council of Churches had responded to justice. I mean, things that I knew, but then I just thought, let me read them once again. And there is so much from 1934, was it? I'm trying to remember. Yeah. No, earlier than that was when the ecumenical movement, even before the World Council of Churches was formed, started talking about justice and peace. It was very much in the vocabulary of the churches and in the formation of the ecumenical movement. And yet, we have always struggled with the concepts of justice and peace. It's gone through many formats, forms, because we always have been a little bit ambivalent about the church and its engagement on justice and peace. And that is why, for me, people like Duncan Forrester are so important, because they in a way, formed the whole work on Christian social ethics in the global field itself, among the churches globally, the impact that his writings had and some of what he had said at different times. And yet, I would say at the moment, from my engagement with the World Council of Churches, justice, the whole discussion is once again under severe threat. There are tremendous efforts to try to stop the work, saying, I remember a few years ago, a woman from one of the bigger development agencies in Europe was visiting Geneva. And she openly told me, you drop the word justice, and we will be able to fund your work. And here I am coordinating the team called Justice, Peace, and Creation. And she says, drop the word justice from your programming, and we will be able to fund your work. Because we have become so dependent on what are called the back donors, which are governments, which are influencing what the World Council of Churches will do. Now, this is an inside story I'm sharing with you because it is a fact. And the work literally was splintered. And even the work we did on violence against women, we were no longer able to fund the work. So we've gone through this history, and we are now at a moment in the World Council of Churches where only fringe groups are talking about it. I remember after the Decade to Overcome Violence, which was a tremendously successful program, women got fully engaged in it because we saw this as a time when the issue of violence against women will come onto the public space. It will not be privatized as it was always done in our churches. So we looked at it as a time when we were going to bring it right up there. And there was the office, which was set up here right in Edinburgh, with Leslie and Helen and also Penny, who helped us to bring to the churches an engagement, a way to engage with the issue of violence against women. So we did all that, but even that was all just sort of disbanded. And we were not able to continue with it any longer because we could not fund all this work. So it's and therefore, for me, that all of you are meeting here as public theologians, I challenge you to think of what is happening with our churches and their inability to speak boldly and strongly on justice-related work, which the world so desperately needs. And how are we going to make the churches move into that public space? They have retreated, literally retreated. And now their interest is on just keeping themselves alive, of surviving in the world today, and protecting denominational interests. Of course, that's the main concern of our churches, of how to become stronger in themselves. Certainly, I'll be speaking of the churches in India when I say that. That has become their life, on how to survive, how to become stronger, and how to compete with other churches, especially the new evangelical churches which are emerging all over the world. So in such an environment, what is the role of public theology? What is your role as public theologians? And how can you help the world church once again reclaim voices like that of Duncan Forrester and many, many others of his generation who contributed so much to these new movements in the church, to sort of reclaim at least part of it? And I therefore encourage you to please look at what's happening with the World Council of Churches as a model of the dangers the church is in. So I feel that we need to reclaim that. And if I can go back to how we as women have done that, perhaps one of the most powerful ways in which we tried to make public the concerns of women was when we reclaimed the image of Christa, the female image of Christ on the cross. it created a huge controversy, of course, because it was not supposed to be possible to have Christ as a woman. And for us as women, it was so powerful because it embodied the pain of women, the suffering of women. And to think of Christ on the cross as representing the suffering and pain of women was so powerful for us. And it continues to be powerful. But the church very successfully took it off the screen, if I could say. It was removed. There were statues of Krista. For instance, the one in Canada, in Toronto, now stands in the garden of the Emmanuel College there. And of course, women congregate around her every year when they remember the famous incident when a gunman had shot 16 women in a polytechnic college in Canada. They do congregate around that image because for them, she is a symbol of resistance to them. But the church would not allow such theological symbols to disturb its own understanding of the atonement, their own understanding which they have given to us. Christology, atonement, forgiveness, healing, these are the kinds of words which the church has evoked in women and has asked us to also look at it from that perspective rather than as a symbol of resistance, the cross as a symbol of resistance to the suffering of women. And there are many other theological themes that have grown in the women's movement, women's feminist theology, to sustain women in their struggles to challenge all this. So I will end here, actually. I'm not going to say more, that we have to be careful of what is happening in our world. We should not become irrelevant as churches. And I feel sometimes that we are heading in that direction because we don't have the courage to challenge the dominant discourse. And I'm hoping that out of this, we can reclaim the heritage of people like Duncan Forrester to bring real change, not just in the methodology of doing public theology or practical theology, but in the content of what our churches are doing with the gospel and with all that Jesus Christ has taught us. Thank you.